A little bit about me. I'm a real estate broker. I run a team of agents out of the Compass, Pasadena, and La Cañada office. We help the average buyer and seller. However, our niche is working with investors. So we're very passionate about that. I also love helping, aspiring investors just get started in real estate investing. So if you want to learn more about that, we can connect offline. We also have an investment part of our business where, we have an investment group. We invest ourselves. We're currently looking at fix and flips and buy and holds. We're noticing some market shift locally here in the LA area. So we're readjusting right now. We're focusing more on the BRRRR strategy, buy and hold. If we find the right flip, we'll jump on it. Right now, the pricing is not right for flips, is what I'm noticing. So that's it about me. We have some investors here that we're just going to go ahead and talk to. Carlos, thank you for jumping on. While we wait for Jamie, we have Anthony here as well. Thank you guys for being here, as well as everybody else.
Thanks for having us, Alex.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Carlos, if you can take a moment, share with us a little bit about your journey. Obviously, we met, through these events, and we've built a very good friendship and bond, I would say, and a business relationship. Can you share with us a little bit about, how you got started, why you got started, and why you started where you started, for example?
Sure. So just like everyone, I had this dream of trying to get into real estate, but I didn't know where to start, right? And then you fall into this loop of, well, I'm just going to read, I'm going to watch Bigger Pockets, and then you get comfortable being comfortable in that cycle. And then my wife was saying, when are we investing in real estate? And I said, well, once I figure this out, and I realized when I figure it all out, I'm going to be 100 years old and I'm going to know every right move to make, but I never took that leap. So funny enough, she said, "Are you going to do it or not?" So almost out of I'm going to show her, I did it. And we were looking at already, I didn't just run out there and pick a market that I didn't know anything about. So we were looking at Indianapolis and Columbus, Ohio. And my wife has ties to Columbus, Ohio. My former business partner lives in Columbus, Ohio. So I had some boots on the ground. My wife used to live a little bit in Columbus, Ohio. Her mother was a professor at Ohio State. So we had some roots there, went to check out the area, talked to our friends that lived there. Met a realtor on Bigger Pockets because that's where I was comfortable playing in that pond. And then I kind of went from there, started looking at deals, started asking questions, started running some numbers, and then found that that was a market that was up and coming and somewhere where I can get comfortable, that I can make a phone call and say, can you go look at this property? I can ask questions here. I joined a bunch of Facebook groups of people that live in Columbus. And some of these groups I joined that had nothing to do with real estate, just school districts of Columbus, Ohio. Hey, I got a question about this area. Um, any type of Facebook group that had anything to do with Columbus, Ohio, I joined, started asking questions, and then from there, I took my leap. I figured I've got the best amount of information that I'm going to have to make this leap. It's either I do it now or I don't, and I continue to wait. That's kind of where I'm at right now, and we're up to 3 properties, 7 doors, and so far so good.
That's awesome. So you're just, mainly focusing on the BRRRR strategy up there.
Yeah, so what we bought in the past is bought distressed properties. The first property I bought was, you're afraid, and I'm gonna just take it easy on this first one. I'm starting to make my first jump. I bought a turnkey property, worked out well, but then once I got comfortable and I started going to the meetings with you and Anthony and talking to you guys about everything, I already had an idea of kind of how to do this, but having the discussions with you guys really gave me the confidence to, okay, I'm gonna try something a little bit different, right? And get a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I'm not gonna try to do a complete teardown from California. So I bought a distressed triplex. And then through my connections in Columbus and meeting different contractors, I'm able to do it all over the phone. Obviously, I built that trust, I built that relationship with them, and that one turned out pretty good. And then the third one, my realtors got great deals, and he said, "Hey, I have another one for you." And so that was the last one we bought. And we are in the middle of cash out refinancing that. I should have a check in my account next week. So
That's
so far it's been, and all to the real estate meetings and asking questions. It's a lot easier when you do this with professionals that have answers, and you have to get comfortable answering or asking those questions when you're uncomfortable, is what I learned.
So it sounds like that's one of the biggest contributors to what you guys have done so far is, connecting with people, asking questions, and taking action.
Right. And the taking action is, I think, the part that scares a lot of people.
That's great.
Carlos, that question for you. What if you could take back and look at it back in your journey, of course, because a lot of things have happened. What would you have done differently, knowing what you know now?
I would have done this earlier because,
Started already.
again, so if you don't know, I'm a school teacher, and we have a teacher that tells all the kids about academics and things. And he says, what you want most in life is on the other side of fear. Whatever you want in life, you know what to do, but your fear stops you. And
Yeah.
so I always say that to whoever wants to do something. You know what you got to do, but your fear was always in the back of your head. And I said, okay, I've been talking about doing this for about 3 years. And then my wife said, are we going to do this or not? And then so I did it. So I would have done it earlier to answer your question. And
That's
then with fear comes answers. Of course, I made some mistakes. Of course, I said, oh man, I paid that contractor way too much. I didn't shop contractors. I should have done this, but I learned a lesson. And now I know something that I didn't know 6 months ago. And in 6 months, I'm going to learn something I don't know today. Just go, or else you're going to be next year. Oh, when I do this, and it's just never going to happen.
And it's interesting. You'll hear, Jamie's story. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of similarities with a lot of these us investors that we've had that. But the good thing is you're taking action. That's the most important thing. Yeah, I know some of you were asking, is this the Section 8 webinar that you signed up for? Yes, it is. This is the one we're excited and waiting for. We just, as I mentioned, Jamie was running a little late. He is on now. So we will get the party started. Thank you guys for being here. With that said, I want to introduce Jamie Gutierrez. I'll have him say more about himself, but just briefly, Jamie comes from an educator background. He also worked for the city, and now he owns 50 plus doors, and he focuses specifically on Section 8 housing. There's a lot of myths around that, so he's here to answer and provide clarity. So, Jamie, thank you so much for coming back on.
Absolutely. First of all, I want to apologize. I had a last minute child pickup. I didn't know they were staying for tutoring, so it kind of threw off my my afternoon. But anyway, I'm here now. Yes, Alex, thank you. Anthony, good to see you. Let's see, started. I was a school teacher, like Carlos was saying. I was also in administration. I worked for the city. I was a government employee. Fortunately, I had a mentor probably 30 plus years ago now, when I think about it. And he told me the same thing. He said, hey, make sure you invest in real estate. You're never going to lose unless you buy in swamp water. You should be okay. And sure enough, he helped me get my first property. He matched my financial aid, and then the rest is history. I continued to kind of save up and pour all my extra pay and overtime. And when I was teaching, I would teach when I was off track, so I can double my checks and pour it all into acquiring at least a property a year.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Um, Former educator, former government employee. I like what Carlos, I caught the tail end of Carlos, and when he was saying there's always the one teacher that says you want to be on the other side of fear. Um, when I was getting into this, I had the same, not the same thing, but interestingly, I had many peers who, you're taught when you're a boomer or whatever the next phase after that is, that, you go to school, you get your degree, you get a career, and you're supposed to be set. But clearly, in this day and age, that regular salary, whether it's every 2 weeks or once a month, is not cutting it. I don't know how new families are going to be able to afford a home, much less take a trip or two a year and buy a car. So I realized early on you have to have extra income. So why Section 8? I do have a robust portfolio. I would say my makeup is probably close to 80, 85% Section 8, and 15 to 20% non-Section 8. For me, big plus was during the pandemic, I had a lot of peers that were not that heavy on Section 8, and they were hurting because a lot of people were not able to make their rent. They were applying for rental assistance. Some got it, some didn't. Whereas my portfolio, even my 15 to 20 percenters, because I do keep the properties up and I manage them, hands-on. I don't let things go more than 2 weeks without addressing certain repairs. Even my non-Section 8s were paying me. But for the most part, I was getting direct deposit on the first of the month, even during the pandemic, during the whole 2.5 years. So it's, government backed, you get that direct deposit. And at the bottom, that's why we do this, or that's why I do this. I have developed generational wealth, whereas my kids are set, and I'm hoping my kids' kids and my kids' kids' kids are pretty set, so long as they follow the instructions in the trust,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And it's in the trust. I've also put that when my kids are of age, that they need to develop a trust so that their kids, the kids that do have kids, will follow suit so that it continues on.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
So
That's
let's
truly
go.
what it's all about. That's truly what it's all about. Generational wealth, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I usually take questions, but since we're doing, so what is Section 8, right? Some of you may know it, some of you may not. Section 8 is basically government housing. It's a government housing subsidy program. So you have a bunch of folks that have a voucher. Now, the vouchers can be a variety. It can be a voucher for a studio. It could be a voucher for a 1 bedroom, 2, 3, and so on. I think they go up to 4, 5, and 6. In my portfolio, I only have a couple of 4 bedrooms. The rest are basically 1 to 3s and maybe a couple of studios. But primarily, in my experience too, I noticed that I try to stay away from 3s and 4s now because they are limited in who has those vouchers. So typically everybody wants to move up. So if you have a 1 bedroom voucher, because it's a lottery ticket, you're going to look for a 2 bedroom apartment and see if the owner will take your 1 bedroom voucher because it pays usually above fair market rent. Now the next bullet point is predetermined rents. So every voucher, whether it's a studio 1 or 2, Section 8 says, okay, if you have a 1 bedroom, we will pay between $2,000 and $2,400, and that's the range. So why the range? It will depend on the size of the unit, the amenities. Does it have parking? Do you have washer and dryer? Does it have AC, etc.? Direct deposit program, as I said, during the pandemic, I didn't have to wait for a check to come in. I didn't have to go pick up anything. My money was put in my bank account via ACH, direct deposit, and I was either mailed a slip telling me what I got, but I think towards the end everything was paperless. So you would just go to the owner's portal and you can see who you were paid for and if there was an issue, if you weren't paid for somebody, why. Security deposit assistance, I loved this during the pandemic and even prior to that. Right now, funding's a little weird, but there was ways where a Section 8 tenant can also apply, depending on the program they're in, for security deposit assistance. So if you have, basically most of the Section 8 voucher holders, some are working, some are not, but if they're considered low income, they're eligible for security deposit assistance. So you can ask for Section 8 to pay their security deposit as well. During the pandemic and still now, certain entities like LACTA and HACLA. So LACTA is the Los Angeles County Development Authority. So they cover all properties in the county of LA. And then HACLA is the housing authority of the city of Los Angeles. So they would cover everything within the city of Los Angeles. And if the individual who has a voucher was homeless, there's a homeless incentive program. They will also give you a holding fee. Usually it's up to 1 month's rent, probably slightly lower, but almost 1 month's rent to hold that unit for that voucher holder until the paperwork goes through. So that way you're not, even though the unit is sitting empty, you're still getting some money while they process the paperwork. Let's see. And then
That's very good to know. I didn't know that.
yeah. Not all units and not all voucher holders are eligible for that, But I know there's a couple of programs like veterans, and if they were in a homeless shelter or they're newly considered homeless because something happened and the property was sold or etc. There, it's a certain couple of categories that qualify for that as well. And then last but not least is the dedicated vendor assistance. So we'll go through the facts and the myths, but there is an owner's assistance line. So if you have any issues or questions with regard to Section 8 paperwork or direct deposit or anything like that, they have a dedicated portal, there's a dedicated email, and there's a line that you can call as an owner to get assistance as well.
Okay. So I'll start from Laurel. If you have a security deposit, but the paperwork doesn't get approved, do you keep the security deposit for the time the unit was vacant?
You mean the holding fee?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, because
Yeah,
it's the holding fees before the paperwork gets approved.
correct. Yes, if I haven't had that happen, Laurel, but the holding fee is yours to keep whether they take the unit or not, because they know that you're waiting. Usually they have vetted the person. If they have a voucher, then they qualify for the voucher. It's just a matter of dotting the i's and crossing the t's and getting a final contract based on the lease that you sign with the tenant. But again, I've never had that happen. I'll give you a scenario that just happened to me earlier this year. I actually had a tenant move into my unit. It was a 3-bedroom unit. I didn't get, actually, it was about 2 or 3 months and I hadn't gotten paid because usually they pay you in arrears. So let's say you move in May 15th, you may not get your first deposit till July 1st or August 1st, but you'll get everything.
Got it.
Anyway, I got an email saying this tenant is immediately leaving, we're canceling her contract. And I was like, well, they wouldn't tell me what happened, so I don't know. But in any case, I still got all my money from the day they moved in. And in that particular instance, I said, hey, they were living there for about 3 months. I'm still gonna have to repair the unit and do some things for the next person that's gonna take possession. And they let me keep almost 80% of the deposit towards rehabbing the unit for the next tenant.
Nice.
So yeah,
Very
so
cool.
that was a you know, you never know, things happen. But as far as the holding fee, that is yours from the onset.
Nice.
Okay.
We have another question from Greg, which I was gonna bring up as far as like you mentioned there was some. It's a little bit goofy as far as the funding and stuff. His question is, how will the Trump tax bill affect Section 8?
Well, again, I don't know all the nuances of the bill, but as of right now, Section 8 hasn't been affected. All I know is that if you have existing Section 8 owners, I mean Section 8 voucher holders, they will continue to be Section 8 voucher holders. There are like specific classifications where within Section 8, again, they have probably 10 or 12 categories for the voucher holders. So I don't believe they're giving any more, they're called choice vouchers, where they probably lowered some of the standards to let people get a Section 8 voucher. But I continue to have properties for myself and for my clients, and we are still getting applications for Section 8 people, whether they're new or they're existing and they're just moving from one unit to another.
So you're not noticing any like funding issues or like slowing
No,
down or
no.
anything? Okay.
No,
Okay.
I haven't. I have noticed that on the third party, because other than Section 8, there's also these third party companies that'll come to you that work with like Salvation Army, Volunteers of America, Brilliant Corners, etc. They may have a pause on their funding. So they're not taking any new applicants, but they
Got
still have a pool of applicants that haven't been housed. So, when you say a pool, it could be 100 or 1,000. So, yeah.
Got it. Another question. Keep these questions coming. These are great. So we have Robel. It says, "What's the difference between Section 8 and government housing assistance? Is it the same or is it the same thing?"
It sounds like it's the same thing. Yeah, government housing assistance is Section 8. Every city of Los Angeles covers a big area, but if you look like at Pasadena, they have their own Section 8 program. Some of the smaller cities will have their own program, so you have to kind of go through them. A county covers a lot of the other areas that the city of LA doesn't. So, but if it's a government assistance, most likely it's going to be some form of Section 8.
Okay. Anybody else, any questions, just drop them in there. Otherwise, we'll jump back into the slides. Please stop me if you see any question.
Okay, so here we go. So here's some myths and facts. Um, so in the past, or even now, there's some belief that all the Section 8 tenants happen to be problematic tenants, that there's a lot of red tape, that the rents are low, and that it's hard to become a vendor. Really, in my experience, and I've been doing this now 20 plus years, I think that perhaps in the beginning, I maybe had more tenants that were, I would hate to say problematic, but maybe thought that the voucher was never going to end and they would never lose it. But once you get kind of into this and you realize that if there is a problem, you send a 3-day notice to pay or quit, or a 3-day notice to correct. You send it to the tenant and to their Section 8 eligibility worker. They really straighten up really quickly because, again, if you have a voucher and they're paying, 70, 80, 100% of your rent, you're not going to jeopardize losing this voucher. So you pretty much, most of my Section 8 tenants, I'm not going to say they're model tenants, but they keep their places pretty nice and they're very approachable. And, if something's an issue with other tenants, they correct it right away. Now, does that mean you're not going to get a problematic tenant? I think that for myself, every 50 tenants I have, I'm going to have one that's, that may have some issues with, and then he or she may be Section 8 or may not be. It's not necessarily a Section 8 person. I just think that's,
It's irrelevant.
it's irrelevant. Yeah, I think that's just the percentages. You're going to once in a while get someone who's just, they
With
are.
my luck, I've seen more problematic regular tenants in Section 8.
Yeah. So, and then that's just sometimes people are who they are, whether they're on Section 8 or not.
Yeah.
Red tape, I really think that the first 2 or 3 people that you do paperwork for will seem like red tape because there's a lot of forms. But once you get through it once, twice, 3 times, after that, it's just a system and it's a template and it becomes easier and easier. Low rents is quite the opposite. They usually pay fair market value and sometimes above. I'll give you an example. They just lowered the rents last month, but prior to that, I was getting 3,900 for a 3-bedroom, 3,000 for a 2, and 2,400 for a 1. I think they've lowered the 3 now to 3,500 and some change. The 2 to 27, I believe, and the 1 went from 24 to like 21. But these properties in the city of LA, I have them in, my niche is South LA and Watts, and to get anything above 3,000 for a 3-bedroom is pretty phenomenal.
Pretty good.
If you think about it.
Now, has this happened? Does it happen regularly? They go down and do they go up, or how does that work?
So this is the beauty. If you have a person in the unit at a certain price, you're never going to go down from that unless they
Cool.
leave.
That's good to
Now,
know.
but the opposite, if you have somebody in there at 2,500 and they happen to leave and the market now goes up, which has happened to me, they either leave because they leave the city or they move up because they had a 2-bedroom voucher, but now they have a 3, so they want to get a 4-bedroom house. You can now rent that unit at the higher market value rent. Now, typically for me, in my areas, if I rent those 3 bedrooms out to a non-Section 8, I'm not going to get anywhere near 39 or 35. I'm looking closer to 29 to 3,100, just because the rents have gone up. But it behooves me to search out a Section 8 tenant because, one, government backed, it's a year lease automatically, then it goes month to month.
Have you had a tenant upgrade within your properties, like from a 2 to the 3 within your properties?
I have, but they usually went from one property to another address, not within the same
Sure.
address. Just depends on
Oh,
the makeup of that particular complex, If I
okay.
have the ability for them to move within the complex, they will, but typically they'll move to one of my other properties that's bigger. And I've
Yeah.
had the opposite. If I have tenants with me for a while, sometimes they'll have a child that becomes 18 and they leave and they get downsized in voucher, but they don't want to leave me as a landlord or owner, so they'll have me look for a smaller unit for them as
That's
well.
pretty cool.
So again, not problematic, not really red tape. Low rents is quite the opposite. Finite vouchers, learning curve. Well, again, like I said, once you get the hang of it, the paperwork, it becomes easier and easier. And now when I go to hard to become a vendor, on the opposite is lifetime approval. So that's kind of the factor, the plus. Once you become a Section 8 vendor, or you put one property up for Section 8 and you get a tenant, you get a vendor number, your vendor number doesn't change. The only time it would change is if you now go from being, you know, Jamie to Downey Investments, which is my corp. Then you get a new vendor number for your corporation, but you still keep the old vendor number as well.
Is it hard to do? Do you advise somebody to, like, if they expect to change the name, to go ahead and do that before they get a vendor number, or is it pretty easy
No,
once
no,
they
it's
get
pretty
one?
easy. Yeah, you just send an email to owner services and say, hey, I am now have a corporation established. I'm going to move some of my properties into the corp. Three of them are Section 8. I want to move those into the Section 8 program. So can you please give me a new vendor number? And then it's just paperwork, and then they'll swap it out, and then and then they'll ask, do you want your direct deposit to go to the same bank account, or do you now have a business banking account?
Got it.
But fairly simple, like anything else, just paperwork.
Very cool.
Yeah, we can go to the next slide, Alex.
Yep.
And bear with me, folks. I got new glasses. I'm still getting used to the distance of the new prescription.
Trust me, I know how it is. I just got
Oh,
it yesterday.
it stinks getting older. So we talked about this. My niche is South LA. I haven't bought too many new properties. I bought a fourplex this year, in early or end of December, January. Um, but typically, I do try to find distressed properties. And what do I mean by distress? I mean properties that have been vandalized or have been um, abated by the city of LA, or they've been burnt down. Or I have my own construction crew. I work with a GC who's a partner, and I also have a lot of subcontractors and handymen. And I've been doing this a long time, so I do look for properties that are distressed, so I can buy them. There's no more pennies on the dollar because everything's expensive. But if they're fixer uppers and they're not at market rents, usually you can get a savings. You can get them at a savings. Again, Section 8 is my niche. 80% of my tenants are Section 8. And why multifamily? I just find that it's easier to finance, 2 to 4. I don't do FHA, but they're easier when it comes to financing as well as insurance. Right now, getting above a 4 unit, 5 units and above, I do have a few of those. And when you try to renew or get new insurance, there's very few companies that are issuing landlord insurance policies for 5 units or above.
Hmm.
So they are, but they're costly.
Hard, yeah.
Yeah. Any
Jump to
questions?
the next slide. We have a question though. Yes. So Robel mentioned, let's say if someone in Section 8 destroys the place they're staying in, does the government repay you for all the damages?
No, no, they won't pay you for all the damages. However, again, unless I'm not saying it could never happen, right? But unless this person has lost their mind and they're gonna lose their voucher, you're gonna go through an eviction, you're gonna obviously do a 3-day notice to correct, and they're not gonna do anything, and you're gonna have to evict them. You're gonna make sure that you keep the worker in the loop so that they do lose their voucher. Um, Depending on how bad it is, you're going to probably have to put a claim in with your insurance. I have started doing some Section 8 with the county. The county does have $5,000 for mitigating some of the move out costs. So they'll give you, if you can show that you had to do X, Y, and Z prior to your tenant moving in, they'll reimburse you as you prep the unit. And they also have some money for when they leave if you have to fix the unit back up as a result of the tenant, damaging the doors or having to repaint or recarpet or redo the hardwood floors or something.
Okay.
Okay.
Very cool. Another question.
And now
So
I'm going to back up. Sorry, Alex.
yeah.
Now, did he say 28,000 in repairs?
No, didn't
Oh,
specify specific
okay.
repairs.
You
No,
said that.
if they damage,
Yeah, yeah.
destroy.
We're hoping that, remember, that's the other thing. I'm going to just kind of segue. For those of you that already have investment properties, you probably already know this, but the people that are thinking of buying their first or their second, these are commercial properties. You want to leave them nice, obviously, for your tenants, but you're not putting real hardwood floors. You're not putting quartz. You're trying not to put, custom kitchen cabinets. Everything should be good commercial grade, because you do want it to last. But that's the other cost savers. You have to really get to know, vendors that sell things for apartments.
I think that's the way it should be for any project, even a fix and flip. You can overbuild it or underbuild it, right? Yeah, under remodel it. So I think you got to be very strategic
Yeah.
with the material you use for any property. Is it a flip? Okay, great. Is it a rental? And so forth. So yeah, you're right.
And,
I,
and and also have a budget. You always have a budget and work backwards. So if you have a budget and all of a sudden, your bathroom remodel is coming way high, then you're gonna have to, cut it back, maybe no tub and just a stand-up shower or something, but you have to stay within your budget so that you don't, run into any issues.
yeah.
Anyway, okay, so here, Alex,
Another, yeah.
go ahead. Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
No, no, no worries at all. So she's asking if can I add a basement to my current Section 8 tenant and ask for higher rent?
No. Um, if you can't, if you add, whether it's a basement or you're adding a second bedroom, the existing voucher holder has a specific voucher for a certain one bedroom, two bedroom, three bedroom. You'd have to obviously do it with permits, but then ask, you'd have
For
to,
reinspection, right?
right, you have to go inspection, but you'd have to ask the current voucher holder if they're going to move up in the voucher from a one to a two, if they would want to stay there. But it gets very tricky. I don't think it's automatic where you get the two-bedroom rent. It's because it's basically they have to move into it, but if it's the same address, it may be problematic. I would have them move out and then have them come back in as a new two-bedroom voucher holder.
She's saying she added that because earlier she brought up a scenario. She has a property in Brooklyn, so I don't know if Brooklyn is different. I don't know your familiarity with out of the states, but
Yeah.
she mentioned like she can add more vouchers from another family member. Is that like can they combine?
I have, I've, I don't know. I don't want to say I'm not familiar with that situation. I've never been in that situation. Again, when I've had people move up or down, I just have them move to another property so I can avoid because it's also, I hate to say nepotism, but you're also supposed to, when you have a vacant property, you're supposed to make it available to all
For the
voucher
market.
holders.
True.
So it's almost like when you're giving a contract and a sole source, if you're not bidding it out per se, right? It is an apartment, but you have to give everybody an opportunity to apply to the unit.
Got it. Got it.
So I would
So
say, yeah,
the cool thing is at the end, we'll share Jamie's contact or ways you can
yes.
reach him. Obviously, he's is definitely there to help. There's different services he provides. He'll share more about that later. But again, he's a great resource, so feel free to reach out to him as well offline.
So this
Uh,
is one of my first success story number one. Um, I bought this, wow, back in 2009. I love when Alex does this because it takes me way back,
brings
right?
memories.
Yeah, yeah. And I was just there yesterday, believe me, guys. I across the next street over is Beach and Graham. I had a Section 8 inspection and one of the smoke detectors wasn't working. But again, having a good rapport with your tenants, I called the tenant at the other property, said, "Hey, I'll get you a new smoke detector, but just bring me one of yours 'cause I need to put it up. It's not working." And sure enough, the guy came over, gave me the smoke detector. I popped it in. I didn't pass inspection because there was something else I had to do with the front door, but 99% of the things were done. So when they come to re-inspect, it's going to be a video inspection. I just have to put a new deadbolt on the door. But everything else passed because the tenant was able to assist me. Anyway, this was, again, when I said stress, this was a stress property. This particular property was taken over by some drug dealers in 2007, 2008, and they were, dealing drugs out of the triplex. One of them had burnt down, so it was vacant, but they had kicked the other tenant in front out, and they were using the two front. They were one bedrooms. They are one bedrooms, and they were basically just, it was a crack house. Um, Finally, city attorney was able to close it down, and if you can see the gate there, it's probably a 10-foot gate, and it was
Yeah.
all around the property, and it was abated. It didn't look like this when I got it. Back in 2009, I got it for 225,000. I was able to put some money into it, and I want to say within 6 months, I got a couple of renters in the back, and I got my first Section 8 in front. and then slowly people left, and I was able to convert the 3 units into Section 8. In the beginning, I think I was only getting $800 or $900 for the 1 bedrooms in the back. My first Section 8 came in around 11 or 12. Now I think all three are at 21, 21 and maybe 2,000 and $2,200.
Wow.
So yeah, so that was probably, we might have done this slide a while back, but they've
Yeah, yeah,
actually,
yeah, yeah.
and
A year
yeah,
and a half ago.
yes, there you go. So yeah, so that's so now I know people are going to say, well, you can't buy a triplex for 225 anymore. This is correct. I just bought again in 2019, which is 5 years ago. I bought a well, we'll get, actually, it's going to be one of my success stories. So let's go to the next one, and then I'll
Sure.
share a new one
There we go.
that's not in there. There we go. So this was one of my first projects where I actually demoed it and I built it up from scratch. This was a 1-1 side by side in 2015 that I bought for 315. And it was a 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 1 kitchen on the left, and a 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 1 kitchen on the right. I demoed it, took permits out, and I made a 3-2 in front and a 3-2 in the back. And it's funny because this was a year and a half. Now, I actually just got the permit this week. I'm making the back into a 2-1 and I'm adding a 1-1. So I'm adding a third kitchen and living room to the very back. It was a very big lot. So it's actually going to be a triplex now. But these are things you could do once you're in it. I heard Carlos was refinancing, I believe. Again, I came in at the tail end of his story. Once you're in these properties, you're going to get equity because you're going to get, if you buy them with the rent super low and you bring up the market rents, you're going to get immediate equity because of the rent rolls. You take that equity and you keep building, whether you add ADU or you just spruce up the property to attract those Section 8 tenants.
The question outside of this, she mentions it sounds like the government sometimes pays above market rents for Section 8 units. Is that true?
Yes. So they call it fair market value, but really, if you are in this area and this neighborhood, you realize that for those that are not Section 8, the rents are a little bit lower. For example, here, again, the rents went up, but even in 2020, I was getting 2550 and 2600 for the 3 bedrooms. Everybody around me was getting 23, 2400. These have gone up since then. Like I said, someone left and I got someone back in at 3400. But the Section 8, usually it says fair market value, but I find that depending on the area, again, Los Angeles is big. If you have a unit closer to the west side, in some of the other areas, they may be on par with the non-Section 8 rents. But in my particular niche in Watts and South LA, my Section 8 rents will be definitely higher than non-Section 8.
Got it. So Lynn dropped a link. You can check what potentially Section 8 would reimburse via that link, which is
Oh,
true.
good.
There's their website that tells you like for 1 bedroom how
Yeah.
much it is and so forth. Another question, Robel, is having multifamily apartments for Section 8 better than multiple single homes for Section 8? What's your thoughts on that? That's a good one.
I mean, I've been able to do both. I find that once you have an SFR, unless you're going to build out the garage or it has a big lot and you can add an ADU, you're going to pay more for your SFR and have just one rent. So I used to have a bunch of townhouses in the valley in Panorama City and Pacoima.
Mhm.
And I found that in the beginning, if my tenant left or something happened and they were out of the unit, I was 100% paying, whether it was the mortgage or the hard money loan or even if it was just those townhouses, I was paying the HOAs, you know, I was leveraged. But when I have 2, 3, or 4, I can have a vacancy and still not have to come out of pocket because the other 2 or 3 rents cover the mortgage and some of the expenses. And that's been my experience. Now, you can't get single family homes anymore for very cheap. So again, my niche in LA, you can get a single family home, 3 bedroom, 2 bath for, they're going for 500, 600, 700,000. Why not pay 900 for a triplex and now you have three rents versus one.
Mhm.
Just the numbers.
And that's really the case for, comparison multifamily to single family, regardless of Section 8 or not. I mean, like you said, you have a vacancy, it offsets it, and you have one roof instead of multiple roofs, right? So there's different ways of looking at it. Despite that, some people still prefer, single family. But again, technically anything under 4 units is still, like you mentioned, Jamie, as far as financing is concerned, it's still considered like residential, so,
Yes, four and less. Yeah, 1 to 4. So
so yeah.
in my Alex, in my experience, my money, my investments give me better results when it's 2, 3, or 4. I
Okay.
have 6, I have 8s, I have 12s. Again, when you run into 6, 8s, and 12s, you have other issues with plumbing and electrical. When something goes bad, then you usually have it's usually affects, several units because they share
Mhm.
some of the plumbing. That's why I found when I do my numbers and I get down to the nitty-gritty, I sometimes make more on my fourplex. And this is another thing. You can have a fourplex and add up to 2 ADUs and you still can get insurance because it's considered a 4 unit. ADUs don't add unit count in terms of insurance or financing. So the bank still considered a fourplex. Well, I think it's my third success story. Yes. So this is my baby. This is one of my favorites. I still have the success stories 1 and 2, but this one only because my other investor partners told me, "Why are you going to pay that much for a triplex? You're crazy. We don't do that per door. So in investor terms, when you buy a property, you always break it down. So how much are you paying per door for that property? So this was only a 3 unit at the time. At 472, I'm paying over 150 a door. And for us, that's unheard of. We try to get them at 90, 100 per door. Anyway, the rents were super low and it was a fixer-upper and the owner was absentee. So I knew that he really wasn't taking care of the tenants. Long story short, this triplex now, those first two buildings now share a roof. So there's a walkway between the first two buildings. I went to the city and I got permission to combine them. So I added a 1 bedroom to each side so that these two ones became twos. Luckily, my front tenant was a non-Section 8 person. So I purposely left the middle unit vacant for during the construction. As soon as a 2 was available, I offered him to move to the bigger unit, not at market rent, but below because he was a good tenant. He was happy. He came up in rent. He got into the 2. I then remodeled the front 2 and got a Section 8 person at market, which is 3,000. I think it was renting for 1,000. So I already tripled my rent. The back unit had a family that was already getting ready to leave, so I remodeled that unit. I added a bathroom, and I had that one at 3,900. And the back has 4 separate garages, so I've already added a 3-2 to the top and two 1 bedroom units on the bottom. So they're ADUs. So I didn't have to add parking. This is all parking in tandem. So this 3 unit in the beginning was only 5 bedrooms. Now we're talking 2, 2, 3, which is 7, and 3 is 10 plus two more ones. It's now a 12 bedroom 3 unit on.
Wow.
So, again, I have it insured, no issues. The bank hasn't given me a problem when I went to refinance and pull a little money out. Again, the units for me, having 2 to 4 is just, it makes more sense than if I couldn't do this if I had a 6 or an
That's
8.
a sweet spot, basically.
Yes, it's a sweet spot for me and for what I necessarily do with the units. And ADUs are the way to go in the future. You don't have to buy another property to bring in more rents. So yeah, the ADU cost me maybe 150,000, but where else can you put 150,000 and get 3,000 monthly interest right on your
Mhm.
150,000? Yeah.
That's so true.
So this is my cash
Very,
cow.
very cool. That's the one. This is
That's
your
the
baby
one.
right here.
Yes.
Awesome. We have a couple questions. So Mei Ping mentioned, is there a limit that how much that you can raise the rent each year, like 3% or so?
Yes, typically it's been 4%. You just have to go, again, if you go to Section 8 website, there's usually bullets at the top because those are hot topics. You can also just Google City of LA Section 8 allowable rental increase. But right now, I think it was 4 and it went back down to 3. But City of LA has been really weird with tenant protections,
Mm-hmm.
basically, but they've been changing things sometimes every 3 months. So you just have to keep checking in to see when it is time to do the rental increase once a year, that you checked and make sure that it's appropriate. If you now, nothing to fear. If you go from 3 to 4 and it was 3, 1% is not going to get you in too much trouble because it's probably, you know, just a few dollars. You can always correct it and then, send back that 1% or give them a credit for it. I mean, it does happen because they are changing it sometimes 2 or 3 times within the year, depending on if city council meets and there's some emergency, or, when the fires happened, they also did some changes.
But definitely check with the local housing authority. I mean, it's gonna may be different for you. She also asked, can I terminate a lease after the lease expired without a reason under Section 8?
No, those days are gone now. When you have a Section 8, you do a year lease, and then it says it goes from month to month. The only way that you can cancel a Section 8 tenant now will be if you are, one, they are, obviously breaking the rules of the lease, or they're not paying you. But if you just want to take it off the rental market, you can't, you can break it, but I think there's a 2 year period that you can't rent to someone else. Like, say you want to move in a family member, or you're going to sell it. At that point, it would be more of a relocation that you have to give them. You can't just arbitrarily say, "Hey, I don't want to rent to uh, these folks anymore."
Gotta be fair, yeah.
Yeah.
Great questions, guys. Great questions. We still have more coming. So, Nisha asked, can you buy a container home on Amazon for about $20,000 and put it on a property and have that be an ADU as well?
Wow, that's a tough question. I am not too familiar with the container ADUs. Um, I
I
mean,
mean, pertaining to a Section 8, do you feel are there like restrictions on like mobile homes, or as long as they pass the safety inspection, that could be possible?
it could be possible, but again, you're looking at, I'll just give you for it to be considered one, two, or three, every bedroom has to be 90 square feet with a separate closet. You obviously have to have running water, you have to have heat. Now, before you have to have, either a wall heater or a floor furnace. Now with the mini splits, you can have a mini split that gives both AC and heat.
Mm-hmm.
That's another way to get away with it. But you have to have, it has to be vented. You have to have running water, closet space, kitchen, bathroom. If it's a studio, obviously you don't need a living room
Yeah,
or bedroom. But if you can make it work, again, I'm not familiar with the
I've never
container
had. Yeah,
ADUs. Yeah, I don't know.
would be interesting.
Yeah, it could
With
be.
the
I mean, at joint
shortage,
housing,
with
that's
the need
that's
of housing, why not, right? It's worth it.
right. You never know.
How would gentrification improve Section 8 housing?
Oof, that's a tough question. How does it improve housing? I don't know, because when you think of gentrification, I don't know if that would reduce the number of people who have vouchers. So I don't know if that would necessarily help the Section 8. It may help the neighborhood and change the dynamics of the neighborhood, but I don't know how that would actually, play out in terms of Section 8 voucher holders, increasing them or decreasing them.
Got it. And then last question of the day. This was awesome. Just so much more fun when we have questions, right?
Yes.
Gerald, how long does it take you to evict a tenant that did not pay their portion of rent?
So there's always the outliers, right? Typically, and then I'll let me kind of phrase it. 24, 25 years doing this, I've only had probably a dozen, quote unquote evictions, but only of the dozen, I've only had to go to court probably on 5 or 6 of them. And of the 5 or 6, I only have had the sheriff come out and actually walk people out, you know, 3 or 4 times.
Mm.
So that being said, most evictions, again, today's a different day. I haven't had, any recently, but most of the times when it's a money issue, you usually try to settle when you go to court the very first time. There's a mediator and you try to settle. You just want your unit back. Again, it depends how much this person owes you. I think the key is, as soon as they owe you past there's usually now with the city of LA, if you have a 3 bedroom, you can't even file the eviction until they owe you more than 2,700, whatever
Hmm.
they see as the fair market value for a
Yeah,
three-bedroom. It's not what they pay, but what they see as the regular three-bedroom rent is.
sure.
Um, so again, that may never happen if you have a Section 8 voucher holder and they only give you $60 and you're getting most of it from Section 8. It's going to take years for that $60 to add up to 2,700. But again,
Oh,
once they get past the threshold and you get to court, you want to settle in court. I know it's the principle, but this is a money thing. You just want your unit back. You want to continue to make money. So it's better to give them the extra month, get them out. They don't damage the property. You get it fixed up and you get them out. So it could be 2 to 3 months typically by the time you go to court and you get them out. That includes the month that they haven't paid you or the 2 months they haven't paid you, maybe an additional 2 months.
yeah. The longer it's offline, the more money you're losing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you're gonna fight for $3,000, but if the rent for that unit is $3,000, then
You
just,
lose.
part of doing business is you just budget for that, every once in a while. That's gonna happen.
Yeah.
For me, it's been maybe once every 2 years. People who are good tenants sometimes lose their jobs or have family emergencies, things happen. So you try to work with them, as much as possible.
That happens for sure. That's amazing, man. Thank you again so much. This is you have Jamie's email, phone number on the screen. Reach out to him if you need to. Um, Again, he has a property management company. There's a lot of resources there. He can help you. Again, Jamie, thank you so much for coming out to the community. Look forward
Absolutely.
to connecting with you soon. And have an awesome day, man. Thank you so
You
much.
too. You guys have a great Friday and weekend. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Take
Okay.
care.